Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments. Today, our guest is Brian Woodring. Brian is a career engineer and leader with over 25 years of experience delivering transformational technology in the financial services and federal sectors, most recently as Chief Technology Officer at Rocket Companies. In his career, Brian has led thousands of technology professionals and developed hundreds of leaders and technology executives. Brian and his family live in the Detroit metropolitan area. Today, we're going to talk about lessons learned the hard way and shifting to embody the leader you truly want to represent. Let's jump in. Brian, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. You know, we've worked together for many years, and as we were prepping for this conversation, I actually learned quite a bit about you that I didn't even know before. So I'm excited for our listeners to hear about it too. The first thing I want to start off with is you were a deep technical engineer before you became a leader. We know that as you're a doer, an individual contributor, it's often the SME, and then turning into leader, it's very different and unique and not easy. So I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about that experience that you had in doing that.
Yeah. Hey, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And you're right. That is maybe one of the hardest transitions to make. I think at every level of leadership, going from leading people to leading leaders, there is that step up where the job changes, the role changes, what's required changes. And probably the most dramatic change is going from an individual doer or contributor, an engineer, an analyst, up into leadership of that role. Yeah, I call it the new leader trap. And I think a lot of it fundamentally comes down to new leaders often don't really understand exactly what the job is, or at least I didn't. I know that when I first went into leadership, my view of leading people was really leading the mission, right? So I was a builder. And so I thought my job was exclusively to ensure that we got the mission done. So that could be shipping a product, building a piece of software, creating a deliverable, hitting a date. In a lot of cases, a lot of new leaders are very impacted by date pressure. Everybody is to some extent, but when you're new to leadership, someone tells you you've got to ship this by this date. You just like, we're going to do whatever it takes. We're going to run through a brick wall. And it was a big struggle. Not that, to be clear, mission leadership is important. You are there, in fact, to get results. Leaders get results, but it's the way you get results that matters, and the way you can get results over the long term that really matters.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you did? Because you're right. You still have the mission. You're there as a leader for the company and the things that you're trying to deliver, but you have a whole team of people that actually have to make it happen. So can you give some examples of some things that you maybe did in error and then what you did to correct it?
Yeah. So I came into leadership with the approach of like, look, we have to hit this mission no matter what. It was a software product. Inevitably, look, when you come into it, it's never a great scenario, right? When a new leader's coming in, it's almost always because something's wrong. So that's another thing too, is most new leaders are thrown into situations where maybe there isn't someone more senior who's available. There isn't someone maybe who's a little better qualified. So you're kind of being thrown into the meat grinder. In this case, this was 20, 25 years ago, and it was the usual. A lot of technical debt. The customer was unhappy. The company I was working for was getting threats. And suddenly I was put in there to try to stop the gap. And so my view was, we've got to get this done at all costs. And I'll be honest, I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I went into the team and literally told them, we're going to get this mission done, and not all of you are going to be here when it's done. Like we're not all going to make it through this, but we're going to get the mission done, which maybe was not the rousing speech that I hoped it was going in. I think it was a little alien. I mean, it worked for a few people. There are some people, because everyone's different. You have to lead the individual person. There are some people who are going to respond to that. They're going to be like, hell yeah, let's go. Let's go get this mission done. But a lot of people, who have lives and families and have more than just the job in their life are going to look at that and say, I'm not here for that. And I don't want to sign up for that. And more to the point, even the people who do sign up for that kind of rally to the mission, they're going to burn out eventually, right? All humans need balance in their lives. They cannot be only about the job. And that's another mistake a lot of leaders make is they are all in. They believe that like nothing is more important than this mission. That's often why they get these jobs. But most of your team members and the people who work for you and with you, they're not nothing but the job, right? They have other things in their life they need time for. And so, yeah, it burned a lot of people out. And we did ship and we did make the mission. And that team collapsed pretty much immediately afterwards.
Yeah, a lot to learn from that. And you said something in there that was really interesting, which was you have to lead to the individual, not necessarily to the team. And as you've risen in your career and led really large teams, what are some ways that you've been able to leverage leading to the individual, knowing that 300, 500 people, 1,000 person team, whatever that size may be, that maybe you could give guidance to leaders as they move from leading individual contributor teams to leading leaders, et cetera.
Yeah. So to kind of elaborate on what I was saying there, one of the things that drives me crazy is the people who have a system. Like they've got a leadership system. It always works. They'll always say something like that. No, I've got the secret. It's in this book that inevitably you have to buy from them to learn it and or subscribe to their Substack or whatever. And they've got a system and it just works. It's like the people who have investment systems. It's like a scheme. And I don't believe that. As both a parent and a leader, I believe you have to lead, or it's very similar to parenting. You have to parent the kid, you have to lead the person. Everyone's different. Everyone reacts to different things. Everyone has different parameters. If you try to take a one size fits all template to leadership and you say, this is how I lead, this is my brand, it's going to fail a large number of people. I think the diversity of what motivates people is so extreme that almost no one approach, be it money or inspiration or whatever it is, whatever your technique is, or compassion, that's going to work for some people, and other people are going to be left cold by it. Now, to your point, how does that scale? Well, for a given team you lead, it requires you to spend a lot more time learning about the people you lead. And that's a big part of the reason people are sometimes reluctant to do that. And they want to have a system because it seems more efficient. Well, if I just have this is how I lead, and I lead everybody the exact same way, that seems like a very efficient approach. But the other way, the way that I think works, is to actually learn every person who you work closely with on a day-to-day basis to really understand what makes them tick. Some people are motivated by money, some people are motivated by the mission, some people are motivated by who they work with. Broadly speaking, those are the three biggest buckets that motivate people. It's their own, what's in it for them, their career and money, which is important. People have lives, people have families, they have careers. It's what do they get to work on? Is it a really interesting problem? Will it be transformational? Will it matter? Does it put a dent in the universe? Things like that. And then the third is, do they get to work with good people? Now, the reality is most people want all of those things, but generally in different balances. And so you really have to learn like what makes somebody tick. Of course, you can't learn what makes thousands of people tick. Realistically, you just can't. What matters there is that inevitably, when you're leading, if you're going to lead hundreds of people or thousands of people, you're going to have other leaders working with you. And you have to teach that same approach, and you have leaders in place that you know are going to do the same thing. And you have to verify. I've had many bad situations in my career throughout where I trusted without verifying. I remember I had one really terrible situation where I promoted a leader up very far from an individual contributor over several years into a very senior leadership role. And when they left, I found out that they had been awful to the team. And I never knew because I just sort of assumed, hey, they were nice to me and they were getting things done. They were leading the mission, but they weren't leading the way they needed to be. So the only thing that scales there is finding people that share those values and then actually verifying that they're doing what they say they're doing.
Those are some great things and a lot to unpack there. I love the three buckets. And some leaders have a hard time connecting with other people. They may be very mission driven or impact driven. And so it's hard for them to realize there's someone that feels differently about that. There's other people that if I'm just there for my career, for the money, I may not feel safe saying that to my leader as well,
Yeah.
because they know their leader may not want to hear that. Do you have any recommendations of questions to ask or things to observe to be able to recognize what type of individual or leader that you're working with?
Well, a couple of things. One, you can't wait to talk to them about what motivates them until you need to motivate them. If you wait, until, hey, someone's got an offer somewhere else and you really want to keep them. And now you're talking about money with them, or now you're talking about how great the team is or how much you value them. It's a little late. You need to be having that conversation throughout. In my case, I always cared about people, but I believed early in my leadership journey that I wasn't supposed to. I know that sounds crazy, but I thought leaders were supposed to be hard-nosed all the time and mission focused. And so in some ways, I thought I was doing what leaders were supposed to do because that was my lived experience with the leaders I'd had. When I actually learned over time that it is okay to care about people, I know this sounds crazy, right? As I'm saying it, you're like, but I genuinely had to learn that it's okay to care about the people you work with and show that and tell them that and ask questions and be curious about them as human beings before you need something from them. That's the key. It comes across as very disingenuous when you wait until you're trying to get something from someone to start to really try to understand them. So you've got to put in the work much earlier.
And I actually met you after you learned this, obviously, because the time that I've known you, you have always been very caring. And I want to let my listeners know, because I think I've said this to you before, but I feel like I need to say it. And we were going through a very hard time at a moment that you came on board, that we were first working together. And you were one of few leaders that ever came to me and you actually apologized for what was going on. And the fact that you just paused for a minute, you sought to understand, you came in, you said, Stacy, what's going on? We talked about it, and then you apologized for the situation. And that right there built that trust that you said, wow, you're really listening to me. You really understand. And so I think it's important. That's one way for you to connect, that even if I was someone that said, hey, I'm only here for the money, like I might say, okay, well, this leader trusts me. They're able to say that. They're able to be empathetic. They probably can be empathetic about those situations too. So I think those are really good examples. And
Well,
I
not to get
wanted to
too
get in.
specific, but that situation we were going through was pretty bad and completely unacceptable. And you were owed that apology. And I'm not too proud to apologize to people. One thing, real quick, you were talking about money, and I don't feel like I answered that. A lot of leaders are uncomfortable talking to the people that work for them or with them about money. And they kind of cultivate this like, well, you shouldn't ask for money. There's something shameful about it. But what I learned a long time ago is that the people who are trying to poach your best people are not ashamed to talk to them about money. They're very eager to talk to them about money, and it's more than you're paying, because they'll just ask, what are you being paid? I'll pay you more. The Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles will come in and pay 50, 100% more. They'll blow it out of the water. If you've created an environment where it's unsafe to talk about money, they're just going to take that offer and leave quietly, and you'll never even really know why. So, as uncomfortable as it can be, people naturally are conditioned like it's somehow awkward or weird to talk about what people make. The reality is, if you're not actually regularly having that conversation with the people working for you, your team members, you're going to lose someone who you could have maybe saved if you just had a more candid conversation with them.
Yeah, I love that. And the reality is we can't always give people money, and people always want money. I want to make more money. Everybody wants to make more money,
Well, Stacey,
always.
real quick, how many times in your career has someone who worked for you told you they made too much? That'd be
Never.
zero. Yeah, that'd be never me either. Weird. Yeah, no, everyone wants more money, but most people, I think, have a sense of decorum. You don't want to create a scenario or a world where it's taboo to talk about in your organization. It needs to be something that people feel safe talking to their leaders about.
Yeah. Love that and totally agree. And I think what's safe is the leader talking about it too and recognizing this is where we're
Mm-hmm.
at. There are companies out there that it's completely open. And there
Mm-hmm.
are some people that work in companies that it's not, and they would rather it be open, and some that don't want it open. But having at
Yeah.
least a private conversation one-on-one is really important
Yes.
in making it safe.
Everyone should be able to talk to their leader about compensation and other challenges they have, any challenge they have, really, without fear that it will be held against them or that they will be judged for it. That's what's really important. People don't talk about it with their leader often because they feel they're going to come across as mercenary or be judged in some way. But as I said, the other person that employs talent, they're not going to hesitate to talk about money. So you need to be prepared to also.
Yeah. And I think what's important about that is how the leader responds when that team member brings it up to you, because then they're going to feel safe to bring it up again or continue the conversation. Because they're telling other people, hey, I was able to talk to this leader about this. You should be able to too, because they're all talking, whether we want them to or not.
Yes. And to your point, that does not mean the answer is going to be yes. That's the candor. That is the mutual respect that comes across is I want you to tell me what matters to you. And that can include money. And I'm not going to judge you for that. That does not mean I'm going to be able to give you everything you want, but I'm going to do my best to create an overall package for you, the people, the mission, the comp, whatever it is that is fulfilling for you and that makes you feel like you're being respected.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the whole package, that's the important piece for the leaders to have with the conversation is understanding that and how to get them to that next level. Like, let's put a plan together and supporting that plan that they can at least see a path to that.
Yeah.
So love those
That's a
pieces.
good point because everything we just said about comp is the same for promotions and titles as well. If when people say, hey, I think I should be a senior or I think I should go into leadership, if your response is, well, you're just being selfish, it's all about you. If you judge them for that or denigrate that kind of aspiration, then they're just not going to come to you. They're just going to go somewhere else that gives them the promotion.
That's right. Yeah. You think you might be protecting them, but really you're just going to lose them.
Yep.
Yeah. You said another thing in there about how you had a leader that you thought was treating a team well. Unfortunately, you found out after the fact that that was not the case. And maybe some pieces that you learned from that that maybe altered how you then worked with other leaders or maybe skip level, go down to the next level
Yeah.
to understand more to try to prevent that from happening again.
Yeah, that was terrible. That was one of those things that happens in your career that you're like, never again. That I will never allow that to happen again. I was so mortified having conversations with people I care about. And I was shocked they didn't tell me these things, but they were scared. They were actually scared of this person and the potential for recrimination. And so a couple of things. One, so this is maybe one of the challenges of going into senior leadership now, right? We talked about the big step up going from an individual contributor to a leader, now to leading leaders. So you're in a director role or a VP type role. The challenge there is it's very tempting to only put your time where things are wrong and you can fix them, right? And you very quickly look across your team and you say, no, they've got it. They've got it. They don't have it. They need help. I'm going to put all my time and focus there. And your other leaders don't deserve that. They don't deserve to be ignored because they're doing a good job. Although I have had to say that before. I've had to tell people if I'm not spending as much time with you, it is because I trust you. But you can only play that card so many times. But also, too, you think they've got it. But if you're not putting in time to verify, people can fail quietly and you don't even know it. And they can fail the team. So you have to force yourself, even when you feel overwhelmed, which you will, even when you feel like one of the things that you own is burning down or you're responsible for is burning down, you got to put your attention there. Your entire team needs you to focus on it and you got to go deep. You got to stay close to the work. I used to actually hate skip level meetings. So when I was, director, VP, and my leader would talk directly to mine, I would feel like threatened, right? Like, why do you need to not talk to them without me there? I was a younger leader then and inexperienced. Don't you trust me? And the reality is they trusted me, but they were verifying, and that was their job. And I do it now too. Taking meetings with people outside of your directs deeper into your organization is critical when you're a senior leader. You will get the true temperature of the team because even good leaders who are doing a good job, they'll tell you what you want to hear. That's just human nature. If one of your directors or your leaders is telling you, no, it's going great, we're going to ship, everything's fine, you got to dig, you got to verify. And yes, it's a little uncomfortable, but the team deserves it. So, like, one of my mottos is like, you've got to be the leader that your team deserves. Your team deserves a good leader. And that's not always going to be easy, and you have to do it even when it's uncomfortable. And that kind of thing can be uncomfortable to really verify someone who you trust. You do trust them, but the team deserves you to do that due diligence and actually dig in. And when you don't, I got a really painful lesson in what happens when you don't do that.
Yeah, I love that. I think what's important is you're building that relationship too, because the first time you meet and do a skip level or whatever you want to call that, and you're meeting with people, they may not be as open, but the more you do it, the more they're going to start trusting you and knowing you. And you need to remember to be vulnerable in those meetings too, and share a little bit about maybe some struggles you're going through in a safe manner, but showing that you're a real human, even though you're a leader. Leaders are humans too, and showing that is really, really important. So I love that you share that for sure.
That's a tough one too, because it's not my nature to want to talk about myself at all. And I've known a lot of other leaders who've said the same thing. I don't want to make it about me. I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about them. But what I learned over the years is the team wants to know you. They want to hear about you. And it's going to be real awkward. I don't love doing the bio and all that stuff because, it's not about me. But to them, it kind of is because you're the person that has a lot of influence on their career and their job day to day. And they actually want to know who they're working with. To your point, is that a real person that cares about me, or is that someone who's just using me?
Yeah, really great point. And I agree with you. It's tough for me to share personal stuff about me too. If you
Yeah.
ask me, I'll tell, but I won't just offer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because it feels in the moment, it kind of feels like narcissistic, like, oh, let me
Yes.
look at me. I'm going to come in and be the hot shot and come tell you all about this stuff. You don't want to hear that. But what I keep hearing from the teams over the years is like they kind of actually do. And so you just got to get over yourself and be open to being vulnerable. So, like, I've talked openly about mental health issues or imposter syndrome or other things because people struggle. Leadership jobs are impossible. And being honest with people that no one's going to get them all right and that it's not possible to, I think goes a long way towards people giving you some grace too.
All right, you said the word, so I have to bring it up, imposter syndrome. And the reason why I want to bring it up is because there's a lot of people out there that believe that only females have imposter syndrome. So I'd love to ask you, have you had it? And if you've had it, what are some things that you've done to try to overcome it?
Yeah, every day, including 10 minutes before this call. Of course, I think it's such BS that people say they don't have imposter syndrome. I guess I'd say it this way. If you don't, you're not being ambitious enough and you're not trying things that are hard enough. If you have found a way to just be like, no, I got it every day, then you really need to stretch yourself and push harder. Because when you try things that are hard and you are pushing your limits and you are growing, you're going to feel self-conscious about it. And you're going to have those moments where you're like, I'm going to fail everyone. I'm going to let people down. I'm not good enough for this. That's how Now, look, if it becomes overwhelming and it's crippling or becomes like anxiety, that's something you maybe have to deal with. But a healthy amount of like, I don't know if I'm rated for this is actually, I think, a really good thing. And it probably tells you it's like when you go to the gym, you feel that little bit of a burn. That's what tells you you're doing something productive. Not too much, you don't want to injure yourself. But like a little bit of imposter syndrome probably tells you you're pushing yourself the right level. I mean, look, is there some correlation there? Maybe. I've probably seen that women that I've led maybe are conditioned to have a little less of that self-confidence. I've probably coached up more women's self-confidence and maybe on the flip side, I've had to kind of coach down a few guys who maybe thought they were maybe a little bit better than they were. I think there's probably some societal conditioning there, but I don't think imposter syndrome is limited to anyone. I think almost everyone who's being honest has it sometimes, and having it on a somewhat regular basis is probably a sign that you are appropriately pushing yourself.
I love that. As you know, it's on my wall, and people that watch the video version of this see this, but that's my mantra is if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. And I
Exactly.
love you tying that to imposter syndrome. There's so many CEOs, CIOs, and CTOs that I talk to that they say, I don't know if I can do this job. I don't know why they picked me. And, the reality is you don't ever go into a role saying, I can do this. You always say, I don't know, we're going to give this a try. So I love that you tie that
Once
to that.
again, not if you're trying things, right? Like maybe if you're just doing the same thing over and over again. But if I didn't feel that occasionally, that would be my sign that I need to push myself just a little bit harder. Also, I think it helps keep ego in check. I don't think it's an unhealthy thing to feel uncertainty sometimes. It's what you do with that that matters. If you curl up and you go into defensive mode, it could be a problem. If you can look at it and say, you know what? What can I do to be better? What can I do to be the leader my team deserves? Then it can be a really healthy thing.
I love that. Yeah, it's the positive outlook, right? Where's the opportunity in it?
Yeah.
For sure. So one of my core principles is that everybody can be successful in the right role. And something you and I talked about when we were talking about preparation for this conversation was about how people can work really hard to try to make something work. And it may be a person in a role, it may be trying to get a project through, and just when you need to recognize that it might not work. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, first off, there was definitely a difficult learning for me there. I have a very distinct memory early in my leadership journey, having an engineer on my team that I honestly I thought he stunk. He wasn't motivated, he didn't care, he wasn't productive. The work he did seemed just honestly kind of half-assed. And I was ready to let this guy go. He's useless to us, et cetera. Remember, this was a somewhat different version of me. And another team was like, no, we'll take him. We'll pick him up. And I'm like, no, you don't want this guy. Go get the open rec. Go hire someone new. But they were convinced we're going to take this guy. I'm like, okay, you know what? It's your problem if you want to take it. And he absolutely crushed it in that other job. He was great. He was like a different person. And so that was a really big lesson for me that context is everything, and that most people have some role out there where they will absolutely kill it and do an amazing job. And a big part of a leader's job is to put people in a position to be successful and find that, including overcoming the ego challenge that is acknowledging that that may not be on your team, that you may not be the right fit for them, your team may not be the right fit, the mission, whatever it is. I think that's really important. And then understanding that people are driven by so many of those outside factors. We talked about who they're working with, what they're working on. Those affect people more than they think. I think people want to believe they are their own, they're an island, they're succeed or fail on their own merits. But we exist in the context that we're in, the company, the team, the mission, the people we're around, and people are very capable of surprising you.
Yeah, really important. I love understand the context, not just
Yeah.
assume what's going on. So, really important. So, you mentioned a book to me many years ago that I read, and you actually mentioned it again recently. So, I'd love for you to talk about that book because a lot of our listeners will ask us, hey, what's a recent book that I should read? What's going on? And so, would you like to talk about that book a little bit?
Yeah. So, okay, for starters, I hate business books. Even the good ones. I know there's some good ones out there, but like all the dysfunctions of a team, habits of highly successful people, I would rather watch paint dry than read that stuff normally. I'm not a business book guy. But years ago, I read this book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. He's one half of Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm. He was also a senior leader at Netscape originally back in the early days of the internet. I think he was like the head of product for them. Why I like this one is that it's not a bunch of obvious, like most business books are like really obvious stuff. Like people work better when they trust you. Like, yeah, that's not knowing that isn't the hard part. Doing it is the hard part, right? But what I love about this is that it really talks at a very specific level about some of the real actual challenges you're going to have as a leader. One that always stuck out to me is you hired a good friend and it's not working out. How do you hold a friend accountable? Maybe you're a startup together and they're not carrying their weight. And it's very practical. And I think so many books, they want to be this sort of high level, inspirational, big ideas, but you can't really use that. Like you can really use like, hey, you have a brilliant jerk on your team. They're incredibly effective, but everyone hates working with them. Or the opposite. You've got someone that everyone loves, but they're not very good at the actual job. Those are really actual hard things you're going to have to do every day as a leader. You're going to have to deal with some kind of a problem like that. And not many books actually want to get down in the weeds with you. And so it's a favorite because like 90% of the really nasty things you're going to have to deal with as a leader, they're somewhere in that book. It's like good reference material almost. A lot of times when I've just got a really difficult situation to deal with, I'll go back and find the equivalent chapter. And there's usually something good in there that I've forgotten because that's the part of the thing about learning a lot. You're going to also forget a lot and have to relearn it. And so just like relearning it and re-internalizing, that's really valuable.
I love that. And the reason why I wanted you to bring that up was
Yeah.
that book is the heart of what this podcast is about, is us bringing on real leaders. What have they really gone through? And that people are not alone, that all leaders go through tough times. And how do you work through those tough times? So I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's what I love about that book too. And I got a
Yeah.
test for you since my co-host and co-author Tracy M. Palmer and I, our book is coming out next month. So I want to hear from you. All right, Stacey, was this high in the sky or was it helpful? But we have co-collaborators that tell their story as well in that book. So
I
it's going
can't
to
wait.
be hopefully super exciting.
That's And all the things I said about management books don't apply here. This is going to be amazing, I'm sure. No, I
All
will
right. Well, we're going to
definitely
have to
read it
say that
because
after you actually read it.
yeah, no, I'm
All
I'm
right.
excited
Well,
about that because not enough people want to talk about those things.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. All right. There's that sound. It's time to ask you some fun questions. Are you ready for the fun questions?
Okay, yeah, let's do this.
All right.
I thought we already
All
had
right.
the fun questions though.
Oh,
All
no.
right,
Well, those were fun. Okay. These are extra fun.
extra fun. Okay. All right, let's do
All
this.
right. If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Okay, yeah. So I've spent my whole life leadership and technology, and it hasn't left a lot of room for learning other things. One of them I would love, and I this is my like retirement goals. I really want to learn how to cook. I know it seems like a low bar. I'm the only person in my family who can't cook except the cat. So like literally my kids, everyone cooks in my family except me, and I've always wanted to learn. And it's my number one retirement goal. You have different goals. Like one is to learn something, learn a new skill. I love taking care of people. I love the idea of making things that people like and make them feel good. And also, it just seems kind of like a little bit of science and a little bit of art, which is kind of how software is too. And so it sounds like the fun thing where you can learn recipes and all, but you can also freestyle a little. It seems like a lot of fun. The little bit I've tried, my daughters have taught me a little, and I've enjoyed it a ton.
Awesome. I love it. And hopefully you learn before the cat.
Yes. I mean, like, okay, just to be clear, we're talking like grilled cheese sandwiches here. I'm at a real low level, real low. And like that's a pretty smart cat. So I've got some stiff competition here.
All right. Next question is, what is one of your favorite family traditions?
Okay, so we're a little weird. And now we're gonna get a little vulnerable here. We have a lot of our own kind of family holidays that we celebrate. And we don't necessarily pay as much attention like we do. We do Christmas, we do Thanksgiving, but we don't pay as much attention to some of the more mainstream holidays. And we kind of invented some of our own family traditions. We had a few of these, but I'll give you an example. My son, who's 15, over the last few years, he loves history, geography, and he loves flags. There's actually a term that I learned as part of this. It's called vexillology. It is the study of flags and symbols. He absolutely adores flags. He draws them. He can tell me at length about what are the best flags and the worst flags. And I remember we saw Flag Day on the calendar and like, it's Flag Day. So we decided that in our family, Flag Day is a celebration of flags. My wife gets like flags. We look like a model UN at our house. The entire front yard is ringed with flags of every nation. Our house, we have streamers up. I think we made cookies. We all draw our own flags. We have like a drawing competition. I don't think many people care about Flag Day normally. I'll be honest, I don't know what it's normally a celebration of. It's not one of the big ones, but in our house it is.
That is so cool. I love that you take it outside, put it in the yard, let people know what you're doing,
Yeah,
even
our
having the
neighbors think we're
family
completely
competition.
yeah, our neighbors think we're completely insane here, but or that we've just totally misunderstood the point of Flag Day. But the joke's on them. We really do understand the spirit of Flag Day.
That's wonderful. Well, Brian, thank you so much for today. I think our listeners are walking away with quite a bit on how to handle certain situations, making sure that you're looking at the human, understanding the different buckets of what may motivate them, how to build those relationships, talking about leading individual contributors to leading leaders. A lot of great takeaways. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Stacey. It was wonderful to be here. I really enjoyed this.
And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way. They may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at tap_be the game changer.
And Stacey Caster _. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner, waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacey Caster, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
This is Tracy Ann Palmer, and be the change you wish to see in the world.